one other question I'd like to ask all of you. COVID-19 has been the greatest disruption in our lifetimes. And disruption is something that we hear about all the time. Jared, for you, what's your greatest fear about what COVID-19 will mean for your area of research? And what's your greatest hope?
I think for me, in kind of assessing what my greatest fear would be, is that what I'm studying is a topic that's already largely been on the back burner, because there are people who study climate change and there's people who don't necessarily believe in climate change, which is unfortunate, but it is a precursor barrier then to talking about the people that are displaced by climate change, if you're not even believing in the concept in the first place. So I guess what I fear is that if we are so many degrees of separation away from this topic when we're able to re-pick up everything post-COVID, what that's going to do for these populations, because kind of as all of us have been talking about in this conversation is we're working with human problems. And because of that, human lives are at stake for many of us, and thinking through if we put these things on the back burner for too long, what's going to happen to those populations. But I think if there is a hope to be found in all of this, it's that in having such a collective, unified response to COVID, if nothing else, it's displayed to me that people from all across the world, no matter who they are, at least for me personally, like my dad and brother are police officers, my mom's a hospital worker. Just thinking about the area that I grew up in and how it's so wildly different from the area that I went to school, and then from the University of Melbourne where I was at in Australia, thinking that all of those communities and all of those pockets of my life are affected by this, and it's requiring and mandating this unified response where everybody's collectively coming together, everybody's wearing a mask, everybody's taking this seriously, everybody's using hand sanitizer, seeing that people are willing to come together on things even when they're divided by the most polarizing of politics. I think it's hopeful for me to see that response can happen in society, and further that hopefully that happens within my own research where we start taking a real look at climate change and start thinking through how this is affecting people and what we're going to do.
So people are capable of change, although
Absolutely.
This is a terrible way to learn it. Liz, if I can go to you, what's your greatest fear or worry about what will happen in your area of research, and what's your greatest hope?
Yeah, I think in the short term, I have a lot of fear about how people who are detained in a variety of whether you call them camp or detention centers, what their health outcomes are going to be. Across the world, a lot of the places where refugees and asylum seekers live in normal conditions don't have access to basic healthcare. There's you hear stories sometimes about fires starting and killing people in refuge, and there's and when people are so close together and don't have the ability to social distance, aren't able to get masks, things like that, it really can create even more vulnerabilities. And there's something particularly gut-wrenching about the idea of people dying from potentially preventable circumstances in a place where they've sought refuge from conflict or climate change or whatever they're fleeing from. In the long term, I'm worried that we're going to see, I think, kind of similar to what Jared mentioned, people continuing to try to close down borders and try to stay insular, potentially the effects of xenophobia that are being brought up with COVID. So there's, I worry about kind of the mentality that we might have about each other in looking at borders and who we consider part of us and allow to be in our spaces.
And in terms of your hope,
Yeah, I really hope that we have a greater sense of how interconnected we are. None of the issues that any of us are doing research about exist in a vacuum. Everybody is implicated in them, and we can't cut each other off. And so I hope that people have a greater sense of how deeply we are connected as a world, and the importance of valuing those connections. Um, I think even on a small community level, similar to what Jared was saying, I'm seeing a lot of people check in on each other that I haven't heard from. I'm friends of mine from times that I was living in other countries are calling me, seeing what's going on. My mother is a farmer, and we'll get calls from people at the farm, from who we know from the farmers market, who are just kind of checking in, and seeing that kind of care and solidarity and awareness, even at the local level, I think is really hopeful, for what we could go forward with on a larger scale.
All right, thank you, Liz. And Helen, if we come to you now, you're dealing with big issues. What are your hopes and what are your fears in terms of COVID-19?
I'll start with my fears because I want to end with a voice of hope. So I think in terms of fear, I've seen, in my work with the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, I saw the boom days of multilateral trade and sort of engaging in free trade agreements and internationalization of global trade, and a really sort of truly interconnected world. My fear is that COVID-19 has accelerated the reversal of that trend in recent years, and an increase in protectionism, in rampant nationalism, and a retreat, as building on a theme that Liz and Jared have both brought up, a retreat into sort of a more closed off society. So that's my biggest fear. And I think in terms of hope, I really think that this event has really caused a lot of global leaders to sit up and take notice of the common challenges that are facing not just their country, not just their region, but humanity. And so I really hope that this will draw attention to the importance of multilateral cooperation, and especially on issues that are facing the entire humanity, such as climate change and what the future society or future generations will have to look at.
All right, well, thank you very much, because I think it's a lot to think about, and they're all incredibly important issues. So again, our thanks to you, Liz and Jared and Helen, for your thoughts, and best wishes to all of you.
Thank you.